Hey everyone, welcome back to our channel. This is episode 7 of our free Golang bootcamp, where we'll be diving deep into some core concepts of Go, covering the basics like variables, data types, conditionals, loops. But that's not all. We'll be applying whatever we learn by building a simple banking system called as GrapplTech banking system, which is similar to an ATM right here on GrapplTech. So by the end of this episode, you'll be able to have a solid understanding of these fundamental concepts and see how they come together into a practical project. So get your coding environment ready, grab a cup of coffee, and let's jump right into the world of Go programming with a GBS. Okay. So what is this GBS? So this is similar to ATM where a user can come and he can enter his details like his full name, account number, and later he can proceed with the transactions like deposit, withdraw, or checking the balance. Okay, and even we'll have multiple checks in the future also. We'll be implementing many checks in the coming sessions. And by building this, we will cover all the core concepts like variables, input, output, data types, typecasting, conditionals, and loops, and that too deeply. Okay, and we'll be having a series of episodes where we'll be covering each and every topic in depth. Okay, so let's get started with variables. Okay, so variables in Go. So what do you mean by variables in Go? Before even understanding a formal definition, let us try to see the code. So this is a previous code which we wrote, right? So what we are trying to build a GBS kind of stuff. So where user can come and we want to take the details from the user. That means we have to store the name of the user and we have to store the account number of the user. So we need a container. So we have to store it somewhere, right? So we need a container. And that container is nothing but variable. Okay. So now let's see the definition. In Go, so a variable is a way to store a piece of data that your program can use and manipulate. So whatever the data which you are storing in a variable, you can use it accordingly and even you can change it. You can manipulate it accordingly. So simply what you can think of variable is nothing but it's a container with a name that holds a value. So you can store data in it and you can use that name whenever it is required. And in particularly in Go, how you are going to declare and how you are going to initialize a variable. Let's see this. Okay. So what before even understanding this declaration, see we found some new words, right? With declaration, initialization. Like what do you mean by those? Declaration is nothing but you'll just tell that we have a variable with this name of this type. Okay. Whereas assigning a value to it, like for example, Ishwa is my name, right? So that's a value to it. And we'll have some random account number, 11 digit number. So that's a value. So that assigning is nothing but initialization. Okay. So that's the difference between declaration and initialization. So let us see how to declare a variable. You can just use a keyword called as var and you can just give it a name. So we are storing name, right? So I'll give a name as name itself. Okay. And here I want, let us try to hard code the values for this moment. And later we'll take the input from the user using our input and output in Golang. Okay. So what I can do is I can just see that the name is going to be Ishwar Nagraj. Okay. No semicolons. Don't worry about the semicolons here. So Go doesn't have this kind of stuff like semicolons, all this. And here if you see it is giving a warning. See, it was declared and not used. So Go is very strict when it comes to this kind of stuff. That means if you declare a variable you have to use it or else you just need to delete it. Okay, so that's what Go will be telling. And now let me print this. Let us use this variable. So println, I'll just say that hello and I'll add this variable name. Okay, and now if I run this, what happens? The command is go run file name dot go. Okay, what this command does is it will compile your program and it will execute your program. It does both the things. Okay, in a single go. And now here you can see that hello Ishwanagar is our output. So that's what we require, right? And even if you observe carefully how to declare, we have used something called as var and we have used the name of the variable. Okay, and this is whatever the name you are assigning has to be in camel case convention. What is this naming convention? Okay, so camel case is nothing but if you have multiple words in the variable names, what you have to do is you should not separate them using underscores, or you should not separate it with hyphens. Instead, the first word has to be in lowercase, whereas the second word has to start with a capitalized version. Okay, here for example we are saying full name, right? What we can do is the first word has to be in lowercase and the second word has to start with a capital letter. Okay, so that's a naming convention and that is named as camel case. We do have snake case also. So snake case is nothing but you'll separate different words with underscores, like full underscore name, and everything has to be in lowercase itself. And if you have different words, we'll separate them with underscores. Whereas in Go, we'll be using camel case for variable naming conventions. Okay, so that is how you'll declare a variable. Here we have declared a variable and even we assigned a value to it. So we have initialized a value to it as well. So that is how generally you'll be declaring and you'll be initializing a variable. Now, let us understand it clearly. Okay, suppose if you have a variable a with 1 and you have variable b with 2.3. Okay, and if I try to print this out, if I try to print the sum of this both, what happens? Let us check. Okay, so why we have to do something called as explicit type assignment? We'll understand the topic. So before even understanding it, let us see why it is required. Okay, here we have a with an integer value 1, we have b with a floating point 2.3, floating point number. Okay, and if you try to add both of them, it will be giving an error. And if you see that error, it is telling that invalid operation. So a plus b, so mismatched types we have in and we have float 64 and you're trying to sum them. How could that be possible? Okay, so what you have to do, you have to either convert into different type of data. So whenever trying to do these kind of operations, both the values has to be in the same type of data. Okay, so what we have to do, we have to convert our a into from integer into floating point number. And how can we do it? We have a function in it. So you can just say that float 64 of a. Okay, you can just say that float 64 of a. Now we have converted from integer into floating point number. So this is nothing but explicit type assignment. So you are casting your integer into float. And now if you run this application, what happens? You can see that the output is 3.3. So we got a floating point value as the output. Okay, so this is the type conversion. But think of some cases where we'll be having some huge mathematical formulas. Okay, so you can't be doing this type conversions over there, right? So what happens is your code becomes gibberish, like it will be somewhat confusing to understand. So everywhere if you're trying to use this type conversion, it will be somewhat confused, right? So you can't understand your code properly, you can't understand the formula which you are using properly. So in such cases, what you can do is we have something called as explicit type assignment. Okay, so what do you mean by explicit type assignment? Simple. If you specifically declare the type of a variable when you create it itself. So this helps ensure that the variable only holds that type of data only. So what we can do is, see, you want a floating point number, right? Here you can just say that float 64. You can define the type of data whenever you're declaring itself. Okay, it can understand without even having this, but it's a better practice to declare, to tell what type of data you're trying to store. Okay, so that is how this is done. So you can just say, now you can eliminate all this type conversion and you can just add a, and I'll change my value from 2 so that we can see the notice the change as well. And now if you run the program, we got the output as 4.3. Okay, now what we have done, we have told the type of data also. Even when declaring itself, we have told this is going to store 2, this is going to store 2.3. So it is going to store a floating point number. So that's what we are trying to tell. So this is called as explicit type assignment. Okay, whenever you do this, you can avoid type conversions in the future. So that's about this, and we'll understand the types of data in the coming sessions. We have dedicated session for all the data types as well. So for now, just understand this is an integer and this is a floating point number, and if you have a string, it has to be enclosed in between double quotes. That is what you have to remember for this moment. Okay, now one more thing, we do have a shorthand operator as well. Okay, so what you can do is, instead of doing all this, what you can do is you can just say that a and add a colon to it and equals to, you can just say that 2.4. I can directly assign my value. Okay, and b another colon and equals to some 3.5. And now if you run this program, the output is going to be 5.9. So this is a shorthand operator, colon and equals to, and what it does is it declares and even initializes at the same time. Whereas what, we'll understand the difference. Okay, so here what we have done, you have eliminated the var keyword and you can directly say that this is going to store this 2.4, and this is capable of inferring by itself. You don't want to tell the type of the data which you're trying to store. Okay, it is capable of doing that. It can understand that it is going to store a floating point value. You don't want to tell to it. Okay, so that's the shorthand operator, and this is the most recommended way of writing variables, of declaring and initializing variables in Go. Okay, so it depends on your requirement, which one you want to choose. It's of your choice. Okay, and now we told that we have two approaches. One is using var keyword and one is using this colon and equals to. Then why do we need two types of approaches? Can you give me some examples to it? If you ask me in this way, of course, I can give you some reasons where you can choose whatever you need. Okay, so here we have two types. One is using var keyword and another one is using this shorthand operator. When to use what? If this is your question, now let us understand about the var keyword initially. Okay, so the main advantage with var keyword is explicit declaration. That means you can declare a var variable with the type explicitly. That's one kind of advantage. And even if you don't give a value to it, it is capable of initializing with a zero value. Okay, so what I meant was, so I have a variable and I'm declaring it with var keyword, and it is going to be the name of the variable, and type is going to be int. Okay, and now I don't want to assign any value, so I don't want to have any value in it. Later in the future, I'll try to assign a value to it. Okay, so at this moment I don't have value for a, so that is what I have right now. And now if you try to run this code, you can see that the output is 0. So even if you haven't assigned a value to it, it is able to initialize it with as the 0 value of that specified type. For example, if this is a string, the 0 value of a string is an empty string, right? So if you run the program again, you can see that we'll get an empty string. So to spot out the difference, let us write the result is, okay, and I'll add a comma to it. And now if I run this program, you can see that the output is going to be an empty string. We have nothing over here. Okay, so the 0 value of that particular type will be initialized. Even if you haven't given a value to it, even if you forgot to give a value to it, it will initialize with the 0 value itself. So that's the second advantage of using var keyword. Whereas the other advantage is the scope, the function scope and the package level scope. So variables can be declared using var both inside the functions, you can consider that as a local scope, and at the package level, which is the global scope. So here we are declaring this a inside the function, right? So we understood function. We have an idea that function is nothing but it takes an input and it gives an output. Okay, and it does some kind of processing in between them. And here this is the local scope. So var a is declared inside the main function. So that is a function level declaration. Okay, and that scope is nothing but function scope. Whereas the global scope is nothing but declaring at the package level. not inside the functions, declaring at the package level. So here we have var and I have b, and this is going to be integer. Okay, you can declare outside the function also at the global level, that is the package level, and you can try to print that one also. Here let us print the value of b is. Okay, and if I try to print b, what happens? The expected output is both the values has to be, one is going to be the empty string and other value is going to be the 0. That is what the expected output. And if I run my code, you can see that output is, the result is we got an empty string and the value of b is we got the 0 value. Okay, so we can tell that using var keyword we can declare at the function scope and even at the global scope, that is the package level as well. Okay, so that's the third advantage of using var keyword. Okay, and mutability, this is the fourth advantage. So what do you mean by mutability? Simply, if I have a value over here telling that this is Ishwar, okay, and later after even printing this, I'll change its value. I'll change its value to some kind of issue, my nickname. And now if I try to print this, okay, if I try to print my a value, you can see that the value is mutable. Okay, so in the first line it printed as Ishwar, in the next line it printed as issue. Okay, so we are able to change the value even after the initialization, so we are able to reassign a new value to it. So that is possible with var keyword. Okay, using var keyword. And what about short declaration? See, short declaration, what happens is, just give me a moment, let me clear this. If you are using shorthand operator, using this, you have to tell the value. Okay, you cannot just tell that, see, I'll just declare, please assign yourself any initial value. You cannot just tell that. Okay, that is not possible using shorthand operator. You must give a value to it. So that's a condition and that's a rule. Okay, and the second advantage is type inference. So it is capable of inferring the value from the value which is defined on the right hand side. So it is able to understand that this is going to be storing a integer value. So this operator is capable of understanding which type of data is given in the right hand side. Okay, so that's an advantage. Okay, it is capable of doing it by itself. Whereas this is only meant for function scope only. You can use short declarations only within the functions but not at the package level. So you cannot use it here. Okay, you cannot just say b is equals to some 3. It will complain. You can see over here expected declaration is different. Okay, you cannot use shorthand operator at the package level. You can only use it in the function scope, that is inside the functions only. Okay, and compact and convenient, so often using for local variables where simplicity is required, right? And type inference is sufficient. If that is your requirement, then you can use shorthand operator. So simply what we can say is, var keyword allows explicit type declarations and zero value initialization, and even it can be used at both the levels, that is package level and the function levels as well. Whereas shorthand operator, it uses type inference and it requires initialization, it is must, and is limited to function level scope only. So both methods are useful in different contexts and often complement each other within Go programs. Okay, so both can be used at different contexts. So you can use sometimes shorthand operator, and even you can use sometimes using the var keyword as well. It depends. And we have something called as multiple value assignment. Okay, so we can do it using var keyword. Even it is possible using shorthand operator also. Let us see that. So we have a and we have b and we have to assign values to it. Okay, so what we can do is simply add an equals to it. Just separate the values also with one command. Okay, if it is declared, you have to use it. That's the rule, right? Now let us print this. Yes, it printed 1 and 2, and it is capable of inferring the data type also. So we haven't declared explicitly what type of data we are trying to store, but still it is capable of doing that. Okay, and you can even mention that one also, like for example, if you want to change these values into float, so you can just say that float 64, and immediately these both values will be changed into float 64 itself. Okay, so we'll not get any kind of bug over here. And even you can do the same thing using shorthand operator as well. So you can just delete this. You should not see, whenever you are using shorthand operator, you should not declare the type of data you're trying to store. So that's a condition you have to remember, and delete this var keyword and add a colon to it. And now it is capable of inferring what type of data it is trying to store. Okay, if you run this, of course, the output will be the same, 1 and 2. So that's about variable declarations, and we have understood how to when to use var keyword and when not to use var keyword, and we even understood what is a shorthand operator and when to use it and when not to use it also. And a topic is left out, that is static typing in Golang. So Go is a statically typed language. You just have to remember that. Okay. So what it means is the type of a variable, such as whether it is an integer, whether it is string or float, it has to be known, and even it is checked by the compiler during the compilation time itself. Okay. Before even the program runs. So compilation time is when we use the command go build, whereas when you run the program, so that's the runtime, that is our execution time. And here, as it is a statically typed language, each and every type of the variables has to be known during the compile time itself. And what this helps is to catch errors early itself and ensure type safety. Okay. And whereas we even have dynamic type languages, like we have Python, JavaScript, right? So for those, it works differently. So during the runtime, the type of data will be inferred. Whereas in Golang, this is a statically typed language. So during the compile time itself, you have like it will be able to infer the type of data, and it will be able to catch errors in the beginning itself. Okay, so it's an interview question. If anyone comes and if they ask you whether Golang is statical type language or dynamical type language, you should be able to give the answer in this way. You should be able to tell the reason also why it is statical type language. Okay, so that's about this session. Actually, I forgot the main thing, right? So here we'll declare name, and this is going to be string, and this is going to store my name, and I'll even declare the account number as well, and this is going to be an integer, and it will store some random value, and I'll just print telling that hello. I'll add my name, and I'll just say that welcome to GBS, and will display his account number. So your account number is, and we'll add the account number as well. Okay, so this is how it works. And if you run this program, we can see the prompt. So hello Ishwan Nagaraj, welcome to GPS, your account number is this one. So we are storing in the variables and we are using those names over here. So we are done with step 1, and in the next session we'll understand about the data types and we'll take the input from the user itself. So here we are hard coding the values, right? But in the next session we'll try to take it from the user. We have dedicated methods over there, we'll use those methods. Okay, so that's about this session. So hope you like this video. Please do subscribe to our channel, and thanks for watching.